Our next speaker today is Sami Awad. I think you get to the end of a conference like this in a place like this, and many of you are muttering to yourself, I just wish I could be an Awad. This family, incredible. Sami serves as the executive director of the Holy Land Trust. We've got many people who are associated with that great organization here with us during the conference. Please welcome Sami Awad.
Okay, thank you for this introduction. Good morning, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be with you today and an honor to speak to such a distinguished delegation at this conference. You guys are so important that I actually wrote my speech for today. That has to mean something. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to share with you today. And it is an honor to be on stage with incredible, godly men such as Manfred Cole and Steve Haas. And thank you very much for being here. I come to you today claiming no experience or expertise on the issue at hand. If you asked me 5 years ago to stand up here or in any conference and talk about the Holocaust, my reactions would have been no, and I would have run away. So you wouldn't even try to argue with me to speak on such an issue. But now I come to you with a deep heart and desire to share with you my story. Or I can even call it my pilgrimage in wanting to look deeper as a Palestinian, as a follower of Jesus, into the core issues that have allowed and continue to allow violence, fear, hatred, mistrust, and resignation to be the main approaches and mechanisms of how we, Palestinians and Israelis, are dealing with each other. I am fully convinced that what we as Palestinians experience on the hands of the occupying force is only the product, not the goal, of something deeper that lies in the Israeli Jewish community, and especially those who came from Europe, and based on their experiences in Europe. This, of course, does not mean that I justify or excuse any acts of violence, but declare that when we are able to understand deeply the causes and not the effects, then we are able to develop and engage in the right actions and in speaking the right words that would allow for violence to stop, racial and ethnic discrimination to end, and for healing to take place, and for new realities to be established. This personal pilgrimage, if I may call it that again, took me to Poland a few years ago. Took me to the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. And I have been again there since, so I've been there twice, and I will definitely go again. And what was my experience? I was there as part of a retreat. Twice it was a 10-day retreat with groups of activists from all around the world, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, you name them, they were there. In what it's called a bearing witness retreat, to bear witness to the tragedy that happened to the Jewish community. And we would spend every day there from 8 in the morning till late at night in prayers, meditation, reflection, dialogue, talking with each other, and experiencing as close as we can possibly the tragedy that happened to the Jewish community and other communities in these death camps. To walk in the bunkers, to walk in the chambers where people were gassed to death, to see the ovens where bodies were burned, the lakes where their ashes were dumped. That was a shock for me. At one point, 3 of us, an American Jew, a Muslim from Turkey, and me as a Palestinian Christian, requested to stay in one bunker for an entire night, and we were granted that permission. And it was called the children's bunker. I don't know if any of you have been there. or have seen it. But this is where the bunker that they kept the children, either before they send them to death or that may have had a potential to work even in a very young age. And it was a cold November night in Poland when we stayed there. And we were ready. We had our coats, we had our sleeping bags, we had everything ready. And we just were there imagining these children, bare-boned, naked children, not having anything on such a night. And it was another one of those powerful experiences that we had, and that I had personally. On the wall of the bunkers, there are drawings that were drawn by the children themselves, and they're still preserved until this day. Children who were suffering, drawing children who were playing and having joy on the walls of this bunker. As I said, this was a shock for me. And this was a historic shock for me. But in Auschwitz, I also experienced a present and future shock as well. If you remember, Schindler's List has been brought out, the movie, the train track that goes into Birkenau, where an entire train would go in before they unloaded the people that were in it. And we would be sitting in circles doing our prayers and meditation right on the grass where the train track was. And one thing that we saw continuously every single day was groups of Israeli children that were brought by Israeli guides to visit and to experience the death camps. They would come in with Israeli flags wrapped around their backs, singing very patriotic songs. And they would go around in this one day to visit all of the sites I mentioned. And then they would sit with their guide in a circle to talk about their experience. And the guide would begin to explain the situation. And you could imagine these children, maybe most of them had grandparents, great uncles and aunts that were killed, maybe even in Auschwitz itself or any of the death camps that existed around Europe. So they're going through this trauma and shock, 13 to 16-year-old children going through this trauma and shock of what they experienced. And then these guides are telling them, guess what? That's not it. It's not over. This is not just our history. This is our present and our future. And these guys, I'm sitting next to a circle as a Palestinian, listening to Israeli guides telling them that if given the opportunity, the Palestinians are going to do the same thing to us as what the Nazis did. And this is why we have to be strong. This is why we have to be in the military. This is why we have to do what we do, because we want to prevent it again. And the Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, they would use these three words, are going to do the same thing to us as what the Nazis did to your grandparents. So you can imagine the shock on the children as well after they hear that. This is their future as well. And of course they come back here. They return here from that shock. Immediately after they finish high school, they are given the only tools of dealing with this potential threat, which is weapons. The Israeli military. This is the only way you could deal with this, is by being violent. By being violent towards you that even might be perceived as a threat. And the soldier now, who's gone through that trauma experience, now is trained in this weaponry, all of a sudden is also put at a checkpoint inside the West Bank, between Palestinian areas, to deal with that potential threat as well. And that was the shock for me of the present and the future. This experience transformed my life, and even I want to say transformed in how I look at nonviolence. As a person who's been active and studying nonviolence since I was 16 years old, or even before that, with my uncle Mubarak, who is with us, I had always thought of nonviolence as a means of resisting the oppression of the other. Nonviolence as a means to even engage in justifying my demands and my rights and my legitimate needs.